We are going to have fun tonight. Okay, let's adjust that just a little. I'm going to have fun tonight. And I suspect you will enjoy it too as you hear about the things that are upon us. Anyway, I shouldn't be laughing about that. We are doing part 2 of a message which I started on March 1st, Signs in the Heavens. And since that time, there has been more development. It's like the Lord is, and by the way, one of the ways I'm going to share with you tonight how the Lord did some confirmations, it's going to take you all the way back to Hurricane Irene when the Lord was speaking to us through television stuff. Remember that? We'd have, Lord speaks to us about Hurricane Irene, and the Addams Family comes on, and something you would never have noticed when it was originally on, because it was just in reruns on, one of the movie channels, was, and everyone saw it, is right in one scene, Fester reached out, grabbed a book, and it said Hurricane Irene, Nightmare from Above. And we've been having dreams and visions and words from the Lord for by then 8, 9, 10 months, and all of a sudden it shows up in the Addams Family. And boy, there's a whole lot of message in that. Adam, we are a part of Adam's family if you haven't figured that out. The first Adam and the second Adam. So, I mean, it was really, that stuff was bizarre, okay? It was fun, but it was definitely bizarre. There's no doubt about it. And tonight I got something that's just about as fun. Okay, so tonight the title of the message is Signs in the Heavens, Part 2. I originally was going to call this like Growing in Our Understanding of the Times in Which We Live, and I thought, yeah, Signs in the Heavens, Part 2 is probably a better title right now because it really is. The two messages are connected. And so, in fact, they're so connected that what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the same way to get us back into the prophetic flow, to let you know that this is the Lord that has been releasing revelation so that we would know what's going on right at the present time. So, this was the first thing that the Lord gave me on December 17th, on a Sunday morning. At the end of the service, after I'd finished my message, sat down, heard from God, and instead of getting up and ministering to the congregation, this is what the Lord gave me. The Lord is about to release a sign in the heavens that is going to get our attention. And I believe it has to do with not only validating what I have spoken today, but demonstrating what he is about to do on the earth. And so I'm going to be watching the heavens. I'm going to be looking for things that are surprising astronomers right now, because the Lord showed me he's about to release a sign in the heavens. And it felt like it was closer rather than far away, but we'll see when it comes into being. And that was what my first message was about, starting March 1st, was building on that. And, of course, talking about the eclipse, which was coming upon us. Now, by the way, back in December, I don't watch stuff like that. I don't know when the next eclipse is coming. I do now because it's April 8th. But that certainly qualifies as a sign in the heavens, just so that we are back on the same page. And again, this is exactly how I started the last message, which is with this scripture. This is Genesis 1:14. Then God said, "Let lights appear in the vault of the heavens to divide between the day and between the night, and let the lights be for portents and for appointed times, as well as for days and years." So there's a whole lot of reasons that those signs or that those lights are up in the heavens. It's not just so that our calendar works out. The Lord communicates other things through those things. Portents, by the way, portents are signs of what is coming. Okay. In one of the ways the lights in the heavens communicate to us is the Lord did put signs in the heaven that they call the zodiac today, but that's been corrupted. It's been around forever. fact, they think Enoch came up with it. So that's a long time ago. But again, they've been corrupted. They're not quite the same thing. But I can tell you a couple of them that we have. We've still got Virgo, the Virgin. Who do you think that represents? Okay, Mary. But God put these signs into the heaven when the earth began. And so these signs, there's this in Revelation 12, the sign of the virgin clothed with the sun and having the child, and she's birthing the child, and the dragon is poised to eat the child, to destroy the child. All of that is talking about the signs in the heavens. And there's only one time in history that those things were all lined up together, and that was April 11th, 3 BC. And it was Rosh Hashanah, which one would expect. I mean, I believe Rosh Hashanah is one of those holidays, the Jewish holidays, that were certainly, when Jesus comes again, the trumpet's going to be blown. But it also is one of those holidays that you'd expect the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords to be born on. And so what a great sign that God put into the sky so it'd be lined up perfectly when Christ was born, and the angel, or John the Revelator, was able to say, hey, this is what that sign is in Revelation 12. And then, of course, there's appointed times. God's calendar, he does different things. Looking up into the heavens, it's the calendar we live by, but it's also his calendar, so that it shows where we are in world history if we understood it the way that the original Adam would have certainly understood it. Okay, so the sign in the heaven that we are looking at, I became aware of it toward the end of January, and that sign in the heaven is the eclipse, which is coming up on April 8th. And the interesting thing about the eclipse is that it is 7 years ago, there was another eclipse, and that other eclipse started up in Salem, Oregon, and came down through Columbia, South Carolina. And now this eclipse, which is on April 8th, pretty much X marks the spot. So, I was, a week ago Monday, I was at an event, and it was at a pretty swanky place. It was a fundraiser, and I was the one that was going to be praying at it. And so during the meal, I'm sitting there listening, and a couple guys at the back table are saying, hey, do you know that if you go to this particular store, blah, 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 you can buy a really good table wine for only $7? And I'm going, literally, I'm in a place that people have paid $500 a plate to be there. And they're talking about $7 table wine. This is like an incongruous, this is like one of these things is not like the other, because I'm going, who's talking about a $7 table wine when you've just paid? In fact, I think that guy was a golfer, and that golfer's paid $1,100 each. So, it was like, and they're talking about $7 table wine. So, of course, my family was in town, and so I said, hey, Dawn, pop on over to that place. And because I've heard on good authority that, just because it was at the table next to me, I've heard on good authority that the wine there is pretty good for only $7 a bottle, and I'm sure my family would appreciate that. And my wallet would appreciate that. And, hey, fam, how you doing? Anyway, so Dawn went there, and of course you don't know what you're doing, but she just bought a bottle of wine, brought it home. And the Lord spoke to her about it 3-4 days after she bought it. You know what the name of the wine was? Moon X. Moon X. And I went, well, this is not why they called it Moon X. But it's called Moon X, and the Lord spoke to her about it and said, hey, why do you think I had you buy that bottle of wine? Because it's another sign of the sign. This is important. We're prophetic people. And so the Lord wants to speak to us. Oh, it gets weirder than this. If you think it's weird to get a bottle of wine with the name, the Moon X, and X marks the spot, we aren't even there yet. Okay, this is going to get bizarre by the time it's over, but it's fun. It's fun. So anyway, so you've got this X marks the spot in the United States of America. And I thought, I saw that X and I went, oh, you ain't going to tell me. Please, Lord, no, don't let it be right over the New Madrid fault. Guess where it's over? Yeah, it is over the New Madrid fault. And the New Madrid fault is... Bob Jones always warned us about the New Madrid fault. The New Madrid fault is, what was it, like 1812, 1811? It did its shaking. The Mississippi actually flowed backwards. It's an awful fault. I mean, it's awful. And Bob Jones always spoke about the New Madrid and said that it was going to hit again. God was going to divide the United States if the United States divided Israel, which is what's going on right now. There's a whole lot of pressure on the United States, or on Israel right now, and the United States is saying you got to stop the war. Okay. In other words, you cannot go in and make sure that this evil organization that attacked you on October 7th is never able to rearm and do it again. And so they're going to force them to accept the current borders and boundaries and all of that, and it's going to create havoc in Israel. So that's what's going on right now, and Bob Jones always told us if the United States divides Israel, it will be divided. By the way, we are long past the if stage. The Lord has shown us that it cannot be stopped. And he took Dawn there in a vision within the last year, I think it was. And while she was there, she could hear and see a heart beating, or not beating. It was a heart, but it wasn't beating. And the Lord said the earthquake is going to restart the heart of America. And Bob Jones had some awful things. Now, there's, as far as that would happen, that it would pretty much stop shipping across the Mississippi because the bridges would all go down. And the Mississippi would be way wider, multiple times wider than it is now in many places. And even John Paul Jackson had insights about that. And by the way, John Paul Jackson saw Cape Girardeau would be where the earthquake hits when it hits, and Cape Girardeau is right in the center of that X, okay? And it's right on the New Madrid fault. So all of that, it's just like everything coming together as I was researching this. I honestly, when I saw the X, I says, please don't let it be on the New Madrid. Please don't let it be on the New Madrid. Because I don't want it to happen. It's a sign of things kicking into high gear. And no one wants to see that stuff come. So anyway, if the United States divides Israel, it'll be divided. Now, this is Chris Reed. Good picture of him, don't you think? Anyway, so we've got this whole thing that the Lord has been giving us. It starts with the solar eclipse, and now Chris is he had a dream last week, Saturday. I was up in Charlotte last week, Saturday, was I not? And he came in that morning, and he sat next to Tom, said, I've had a dream, and then he shared it on Tom Hardiman. And he shared it on Sunday morning. Was that last week? When did I show it? 2 weeks ago it was. 2 weeks ago. Yeah, because I've showed this last Friday night. We're going to show it again because of the fact that I didn't show it Sunday morning, and we need to have it on the video, so it's our reference point. So pay attention. This is about 10 minutes, but it's very interesting.
Yesterday morning, I had a dream that I believe was very prophetic. It was not one of those normal kind of dreams, and I want to submit it to you all to pray about it, to seek the Lord about it. I believe there's hope and redemption in it, but I believe it's a warning. You know, there are some things that we receive from the Lord that are conditional, that we can pray and it makes a difference, or it minimizes the danger or the damage. I know some things are set in stone, but some things can be altered and changed by human behavior and prayer, such as often we talk about Hezekiah, who received the prophetic word that wasn't wrong. Get your house in order, you're going to die. And he turned his face to the wall and repented. And 15 years was added to his life. Same with Jonah and Nineveh. By the time Jonah got his act together and got to Nineveh, he was preaching, judgment was coming, but that judgment was put off. And so I share this dream to you today in the fear of the Lord. I've just given it a title to recognize it, the Rebirth of America dream. I had an intense dream Saturday morning, March the 9th, 2024, that seemed prophetic about the eclipse in April 2024 that's being talked about, triggering an awakening that starts in April 2024 and lasts until July 2025. So over a year. I'm only sharing the dream, no more, no less. I was moving fast in time in the dream, starting in April 2024 with the eclipse that crossed over Texas, which people have been talking about. It seemed in this dream that Texas was pulled into this. At the same time, around April 2024, a conception, metaphorically, a conception happened at this time and coincided with this eclipse, leading to something serious happening in the nation before the elections in November 2024. Before the elections, something serious. This event caused absolute chaos and affected the elections in the U.S. in November 2024. It seemed like an epic October surprise, and pandemonium ensued. In the dream, I knew that President Biden had fizzled out and they had tried hard to prop him up. But this event, right before the election, caused a major division of America right before and during the election time. It intensified the division already in the nation to a very scary and intense level. And then the dream shifted, and it was somehow I was in 1968, and I was given an old newspaper which said, quote, assassination of two major leaders in the same year of the Chicago Convention, unquote. I'm sure you know this to be the case as well. Robert Kennedy Sr., Bobby Kennedy, and Martin Luther King Jr., who were both killed in 1968, tragically. But what's also interesting about 1968, the Democratic Convention was in Chicago. And it's in Chicago in 2024. And I knew that was significant. But through all of the painful chaos in the streets, the economy, and on the news, America had a huge awakening of awareness of evil and corruption going on in America. And it was like the vast majority of the nation on the other side of this said, we can never let this happen again. We can't. The dream ended, and at the end of the dream, it was July 2025. Now, for some reason, July the 11th was highlighted to me on the calendar. It seemed like most of the chaos ended in the nation, and things were starting to heal by July 2025. It had all started in the April-May 2024 time with the eclipse beginning, coinciding with a conception. And there were 40 weeks long of pregnancy with intense birth pains intensifying before the delivery. And then there were complications before the birth and after the birth. Since the conception happens in around April, 9 months later would have the baby being born in January of 2025. Now, what's interesting about that, that's also typically when the inauguration takes place. But this baby was born, and the thing that happened right before the election was almost like it went into Braxton Hicks contractions. It seemed like the birthing time was then, but it was still very intense and felt very real. And it was like the baby wanted to come at that moment, but somehow it was delayed to not being born ahead of time as a premature baby before the election, when this bad event happens, and it held off until January. So the birth, as I said, was in January 2025 and was placed in an incubator even after it was born for several months. The baby lived, and it was a beautiful baby. And the dream ended by me seeing this baby wrapped in an American flag. And it was like in the maternity ward. And you know how like they have babies laying in little beds with their name tags at the top? The name of the baby was America. And so I couldn't help believe it was the rebirth of America. And so I think what's important, to share about that, just a summary. Let me pull this summary up here. The dream seems to portray an awakening starting in April 2024 with a significant shaking going on, starting then. Coinciding with a 40-week-long painful and traumatic pregnancy. A traumatic event triggers chaos before the elections, and the chaos lasted for several months. And the birth occurred in January of 2025, requiring care in the incubator at least until July 2025. The 1968 convention, which was chaotic, by the way, the Democratic Convention in 1968 was very chaotic. It was very much a time like now. There was a lot of protests and just, does anybody remember the convention of 1968 in Chicago? Yeah, well, it's scheduled to be in Chicago this year. And here's the part, and we need to pray about all of this. I think this is a warning and a call to the intercessors and to the people of God to take this serious, because in the dream, referencing the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago, referencing knowing Martin Luther King Jr., and of course Bobby Kennedy were both killed, I felt that the warning was there seems to be an indication of a coming assassination attempt sometime during this 16-month process from April 2024 till July 2025. And so we don't want to see that happen to anybody. But I feel that this is important to share and to put before the body of believers to pray into this, to see if the Lord can intervene and help us and show us what to pray and how to pray, and if some of this can be lessened or prevented. And I believe the dream was significant. And so I think we are entering into a unique time in American history. These next, starting in April, really now, But starting in April, there is a 16-month process or thereabouts that I believe is very integral to the restoration or the rebirthing of this nation. So will you help me pray about this? Will you help me pray into this?
Okay, that you heard him say a shaking starting in April or May. Whether he is referring to an earthquake specifically or not, who knows? He did not say anything about an earthquake, but he did say an awakening starting in April with the eclipse, which means the Lord in a dream got him focused on an eclipse or the eclipse and told him that is without a doubt, when you've got that type of backup right now, what the Lord was showing me on December 17th was the eclipse. So that I'm just telling you that now. That is like the Lord certifying it, that this was what he was speaking to me about on December 17th, because Chris got the dream. Now, got to tell you about a warning last week we got from the Coral Springs Police Department. I sent it out to the Clergy Coalition this week and to others beyond it, because it was one of those warnings that says, be aware that right now there is chatter that ISIS is urging its affiliates to attack houses of faith during their holidays. And so you think, well, what's coming up? Well, there's Easter coming up and there's Passover coming up. And so Passover, of course, for the Jewish people, and Easter for Christians. There was some reference to Ramadan in the news release, and I almost smiled because I thought, generally speaking, ISIS doesn't attack Muslims. Okay, so I didn't think that was going to be, I mean, sometimes Muslims do it. Those of Islam attack other branches of Islam. But I think if they're attacking in the United States or worldwide in Western culture, they're not going to be aiming at other, people that share some branch of their own religion. So that just came in, and they're saying ISIS is stirring up the affiliates to terrorism, and there's specific warnings for houses of faith with a focus on the holidays. Okay, now, I want to pull in a couple of things real quick so you can tell how bizarre this next thing was. Chris Reed's warning, tied to the eclipse, references 1968, how troubled the United States was, and the assassinations. Okay. And the warning we got referenced ISIS. Okay, now this happened last week, Wednesday night. No, last week. Yeah, Wednesday night. Not this week, last week. My family was still in town. I was sitting out on the back patio waiting for them to come, and I had just been watching the original series, Star Trek episode. I haven't watched it in decades. And I thought, because you know how you think this is so slow compared to modern stuff that you just wonder how painful it's going to be. And somehow the Lord gave me the grace to be able to start watching it, and just kind of you can disengage your mind because it's just very slow compared to what we're used to. And so there's some episodes that are just so bad you gotta just fast forward through them because they're just like so painful. But so anyway, I was playing that and doing some other stuff. It was kind of in the background, and it got done with one episode, and just as my family was showing up, it got to the episode. I forget what it's called right now. It's just, my mind just blanked on it. But it's the last episode of season 2 of the original series, and it's about the Enterprise, that's the ship, returning to planet Earth on purpose. There's a couple of times they do this because it's always fun in science fiction to go back in time and photobomb your current place or the real time that you're in. Anyway, as it is starting out, it says the Enterprise is going back to one of the tumultuous times in Earth history, 1968, to see how it survived. And I went, now, those of you that ever watched the original series, this is the episode with Gary Seven, and they have to stop a nuclear launch and all that stuff because there's all sorts of stuff happening. But I thought, I saw that and I went, wow. Okay, and my family got there, so I shut it off and I said, we have an elders call to discuss this dream the next morning or the next day. And I knew before I got on that elders call I had to watch the rest of that episode because I'm thinking, what are the odds? The Enterprise goes back to 1968. And I thought, that's really weird. So the next day, I was able to, not much before the call that we had with the entire MFM, to be able to discuss Chris's dream and what it is God's been showing us. But I had a chance to watch the series. They went back in time on the exact day of a famous assassination. And you think, I'm going, what? They're back there on the same day, 1968, which Chris had just spoken about, and the assassination day. And I'm going, this is just one of the bizarrest confirmations I can ever see. And I watched it, and I went, okay, I'm missing something. There's something else. I'm just missing something. What is it I'm missing? And I said, and because I could feel it. And so I just rewound a ways, and I brought it forward again, and I thought, oh, I got it now. One of the characters that's mentioned over and over again, the character's name is Isis. And I went, well, isn't that a fine kettle of fish? I was like, you got to be joking. How can you have both of these themes that the Lord has been making us aware of in this Star Trek episode? And so that's the fun part of tonight from my perspective. I told you that when we were back with Hurricane Irene in 1998, 1999, you'd run into stuff like this all of the time. To me, this says the Lord saying, pay attention because I'm going to communicate to you in ways that you can't even begin to imagine. Now, by the way, am I going to be looking for a prophetic word under every old episode rock? And the answer is no. But when it smacks you in the face, and the very first thing is the Enterprise has returned to 1968 Earth, and then a little later in the episode, it says, today is the day of a famous assassination, and then one of the characters' names is Isis, right when you're dealing with this alert you have to send out. I'm thinking to myself, this is very interesting. And it is, it's worth thinking about at least, and praying about. Obviously, we want to pray protection. I know the intercessors are already praying based upon what has already given us. God has already given us on this. Now, I want to do something that, to conclude this message, which I think is intriguing. I'm not going to say it's thus says the Lord yet, but I am saying that I think I kind of like it. Okay. You may not. Daniel chapter 9, starting with verse 24. It says, 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city to complete transgression, to seal up sins, and to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in eternal righteousness, to certify vision and prophets, and to anoint the Holy of Holies. Know this and understand, from the time of the decree to return and rebuild Jerusalem until Prince Messiah, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. She will be rebuilt again with a central plaza and moat, and in times of distress. Okay, you all know this prophecy. It's not very clear, and yet it's stunningly clear in some ways, because it's talking about things about when Messiah is going to come. And the angel is giving Daniel information that he needs to have. And so it's talking about 70 weeks, and it's 70 weeks of years. Okay? So that's 490 years. 69 weeks, by the way, is 483 years. And so the 483 is important because it breaks it up that way. It says 7 weeks and 62 weeks, so it's 69 weeks total. But it's 70 weeks total, and it just says it breaks it down in this fashion. So it's 70 weeks of years, 490 years, a total of 69 weeks first, 483 years. Now, you always have to ask yourself, what decree is being spoken about? And that is the huge discussion. Unfortunately, this has become one of those theological footballs that people always argue about. And sometime back in the history when premillennialism was first developing, someone decided that the years are only 360-day years instead of 365.25-day years. On average, it's 365.25. But so by using that, and there's really no reason you would go with a 360-day year, except that someone said it makes it fit. And so you understand that, but that's not how you do things. If it says it's a year, it's going to be a 365.25-day year. We have a leap year every fourth year because of that 0.25. And so anyway, it's interesting because you have to figure out the decree. Was it the decree of Cyrus? Or there were other decrees also, determinations that went out to be able to say that there was the city needs to be rebuilt. But the one, and I just finished reading this again, Nehemiah. Nehemiah went out with documents in his hand from Artaxerxes, and the year was 458 BC, and he had permission to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And so Artaxerxes and Nehemiah was 458 BC. Now you add 490, and you get 33 AD. Now I know some of you are math whizzes saying, wait a minute, I've just looked at that, and it looks like you're off by a year. If you're counting year 0, you will be off by a year. It ain't me that's off, though. There was no year 0. So it goes to AD. 490 years goes to AD 33. What do we know that happened in AD 33? Crucifixion. And so anyway, you say, now how that all breaks down in the middle of that, all the 62 and the 7 and all that stuff, we can get into that some other time. That's way too deep. But tonight I just want to point out, I think we've got this down, 33 AD. And as you look at that, you say, wow, isn't that interesting? The only problem we got is look at the things that are supposed to have happened. The first 3 we know happened by 33 AD. It's determined for your people and for your holy city to complete transgression, to seal up sins, and make atonement for iniquity. Well, we know that's all Jesus did. That's describing his first time here, right? He completed transgression, he filled it up, he sealed up sins, and he made atonement for iniquity. That's his job description. Okay, good stuff. He did all that. However, look at the stuff in yellow. You say, to bring in eternal righteousness. Well, there's a way you could try to make that fit by talking about forensic righteousness rather than applied righteousness to our lives. But then you go to certify vision and prophet, and it is prophet, not prophecy. It's saying, there's prophets that have spoken, and so vision and prophet are all going to be certified as true. Okay, well, that one's not quite there yet. Because there's still a lot of prophecy and prophet stuff that hasn't been fulfilled yet. And then to anoint the Holy of Holies. And again, that hasn't taken place. So you think, which is why people have that way of looking at this where they say, well, there's 69 weeks, and then the clock stops. Now, you understand the Bible doesn't say anything like this. But they say after 69 weeks, the clock stops, and then you go forward into time until you get into our time, and then the clock will start running, and it's usually premillennialists that teach this, and they say the church is going to get raptured out of here, and then the 7 years starts again. The 7 years continues. But that's really not what the Scripture says at all. And to say that we're taken out before the rapture is to miss, or before the tribulation is to miss the role that we have in that. I mean, if you've been around here a while, you realize that's going to be the best time the church has in history, as we demonstrate the life of God in the face of all of the things that are going wrong in the world, in the same way that we are doing today. So, anyway, that's kind of interesting. And this week, Monday, I got a video put into my hands by a friend of mine. Again, timing is everything. He said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And the perspective of the man is simply this. It's built around Isaiah 60, verse 10. And I don't know of anyone who has ever seen this before. Remember in the book of Daniel, it says that Daniel seal up the prophecies until the time of the end. And I think that the Lord gave the man I was listening to a key to help start to unseal the prophecies. Because based upon Isaiah 60:10, he says, or it says, the son of the foreigner, should be foreign person or foreigner, will build your walls, and their kings will attend to you. For in my anger I struck you, and in my favor I have compassion on you. Okay, now, the only problem with that is that when the temple was rebuilt by Nehemiah, foreigners were explicitly excluded. If you read Nehemiah, one of the big deals is he had to say no to them, and that caused great problems, but he stood by his guns. He just stood by it and said, no, only the Jewish people are building these walls. And Isaiah 60:10 says, the sons of the foreigner will build your walls, and their kings will attend to you. And this man started to say, I wonder if this is a clue that God hid something in Isaiah 60. And by the way, Isaiah 60 is arise, sign, for your light has come. The glory of the Lord appears upon you as the world gets dark. It's talking a lot about the days in which we live already. And now it just drops this little nugget in. And this is what the guy says in his head. Hey, is there any record of a foreign king issuing a decree, or a king issuing a decree, and then foreigners built the walls of Jerusalem? Because, well, it's not unusual that a foreign king would issue a decree, because Cyrus did it, Artaxerxes did it, Xerxes did it. I mean, they were issuing decrees all over the place. But the walls were never rebuilt by foreigners. Is there any time in history we can find that out? And I'm glad you asked. In Nehemiah's time, foreigners were excluded, so you look for another decree. And if you ever visit Jerusalem, you can find this plaque on a wall. And it's a decree which Solomon released. And it says, he has ordered the construction of this blessed Sabal, our master, the Sultan, the greatest Sultan and the honorable Hakan, who rules the necks of the nations, the Sultan of the lands of Rum, the Arabs and Persians, the Sultan Suleiman, son of Sultan Selim Khan. May Allah perpetuate his reign and his sultanate. He didn't. On the date of Hijrah of the prophets at the beginning of Shaban, the blessed, in the year 943. And the Gregorian date of this decree is the 13th to the 23rd of January, 1537. And then he had his people build the walls and start restoring Jerusalem. So, 1537, very interesting. I'll do the math for you because I know, it's a little hard to think all that through. If you take AD 1537 and you add 483 years, 69 weeks, you get to 2020. Isn't that interesting? Well, it's a good thing nothing really weird happened in 2020, or you'd think it might have been the start of the tribulation. No, you're missing it. Worldwide event. First time in history, governments acted in a coordinated fashion against their own people to keep them in their houses and away from each other. Oh, I didn't say that. I'm just not trying to trip the algorithms. Okay. Anyway, this is one of those when you hear this and then you see the math work out, you go, oh, wow, is that interesting? Because you think to yourself, that's amazing. So here's the thing that the two differences in how he's thinking through things. Anyway, if you look at the first, this is what most people think. If you think about the 69 weeks, and then the 7th week will be way at the end of history. So they think that you go from 444 BC, whatever the decree was, whoever that was in 444 BC, you get to AD 33, and that was Christ giving his life for us. And then there's this huge gap, and it's been 283 plus weeks already of years, so it's going on, okay, for quite a while. Or you have two, that double fulfillment prophecy thing, which is Scripture's filled with it. I think the book of Revelation is double fulfillment prophecy. I think Matthew 24 is double fulfillment prophecy. I think it's perfect if this is double fulfillment prophecy. But then you got 458 BC to AD 33, and then the gap when the next decree, the one that matches Isaiah 60:10, is brought to fruition, and that starts in 1537, which in this scenario, he assumes the second advent will be 2027. I'm not quite there, but I think it's intriguing. The only thing that would make me think even more seriously is about this is, say, about 3.5 years into it, if there had been a covenant signed that brought peace to the Middle East. Yeah, the Accord. Not 3.5 years into it, but right at the beginning of it. The Abraham Accord, the Abrahamic Accord. And that was signed in September of 2020. And it says it's going to be broken 3.5 years later. And it is, because it's March. 3.5 years after September of 2020 is just what we're seeing right now. That accord is being set aside, mostly by our president right now and our nation. And it makes it sound, when you look at the scriptures, it makes it sound like the person who initiated the peace process destroys it. But there's this thing where the office of a individual can be the individual. And so it was the office of the presidency that started the accord, and it's the office of the presidency which is ending the accord. And so when you see that, you go, wow, that's intriguing. Now, what if this is true? Well, it means we've gotten through 3.5 years without too much trouble. God's people are covered. Okay? We're being told now, and we're going to find out real quickly whether this is true or not. What we're getting is from the Lord. We're finding out right now that we may be stepping into a rather intense time because the accords are being set aside very clearly, but we may be stepping into a very intense time, but it's a birthing time. It's a time where God is going to restore America, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be significant fun. That's what you're hearing. 1968 wasn't fun. Okay, those of you that are old enough to remember, 1968 was grievous. And so we'll have a chance to see what happens starting in April and May, because that's Chris was making it sound like you could expect things to you could start to see the awakening already in April and May. We don't know what that means. Like, and I'm not saying there's going to be an earthquake that hits in April, because I don't know God's timing framing on that. I know there's a sign in the heaven that's pointing to it, but I don't know when it is after that. And if it happened on April 8th, I'd be as shocked as the rest of you, because I'd be going, I didn't think that was going to be. I think it's one of those things where the sign in the heavens is there and everyone prays to take the death out of it, to take the, whatever, to pray whatever we can pray to save human life and to release God's mercy as much as is possible. So we'll see where we're going with this, but I wanted to I just kind of wanted to tie this whole thing together. And when I saw Isaiah 60:10 and did the math, I thought, this is too good to pass up. But tell you what, and I'm not saying I'm not going to say we're in the tribulation right now. I'm just not going to. I'm not convinced. But I thought it was an intriguing little study to think about, because it makes you go, isn't that interesting? So I'll do more study. I'll seek the Lord on it. We'll find out together what it is that God is saying. But I wanted to share with you what I had on this right now, because I am really geeked that God is up to something. I hope you're as excited as I am, except for that whole end of the world thing. You understand that when Christ comes again, it's not the end of the world. It's just that he comes to Jerusalem, and that's where he starts governing world history, and we continue on living just like we've always lived, except now we know where he is. And Satan is bound for 1,000 years. The world changes that day. And it's going to be a far different place, because he's King of Kings and Lord of Lords. But we're still going to have to keep our jobs and do our economies and, raise our families and do all of that. That's what happens during the millennium. And the one who only lives to 100 years is viewed as if they're cursed. You should be looking forward to this if we're in it already, right? Not being afraid, because when the millennium comes and when Christ returns, holy smokes, are things going to get good for his people. So, let's pray. Thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to be able to go through this study. Thank you for speaking to us, first to me on December 17th, and then in so many interesting ways and even bizarre ones, confirming that you're involved in this, Lord. So I look forward to even more revelation, more understanding. And Lord, help us understand more about what this eclipse, this moon making an X, means, so that we are able to be confident in your design and purposes. In your name, Jesus. Amen.